deep within the vast, windswept steppes of Kazakhstan, a place where the sky is just this immense and endless bowl, and the silence is only broken by the whisper of the wind across the grasslands. The earth holds a secret. There's a story written in ancient layers of rock, in strata that were laid down as sediment in a sea that's long been forgotten. These rocks have been patient. They've kept their counsel for 50 million years. They've been through ice ages and warming periods, through the slow rise of mountains and the patient grinding down of continents. And inside them, they hold the faint, ghostly imprint of an event that, by all the laws of our known history, just defies our timeline. I was just thinking, 50 million years is such a hard number to even get your head around. It's a timescale that's just immense. So what is this imprint? Well, it's not the fossil of some bizarre transitional beast that was caught forever in a moment of evolutionary change. And it's not the dramatic, cracked scar of an ancient natural cataclysm, like a volcano or an earthquake. It's something far more subtle and, honestly, infinitely more unsettling. It's the isotopic composition of the element uranium, its fundamental atomic signature. Okay, so think of an element as a musical note. It's a pure tone that's defined by the number of protons in its core. Uranium is one of those notes. But like a note on a piano, it can have different flavors, different textures. These are its isotopes. Basically, atoms with the same number of protons but a different number of neutrons. In nature, uranium ore has a very specific, very predictable ratio of its two main isotopes, uranium-238 and the much rarer fissile uranium-235. You see, this ratio is a constant. It's a law of nature, and it's as reliable as gravity. But in these 50-million-year-old rocks from Kazakhstan, that ratio is wrong. It's disturbed. A tiny fraction of the uranium-235 is just missing, as if it's been used up. And in its place, we find other, stranger elements: barium, krypton, neodymium. These are the precise daughter products that are left behind when a uranium atom is violently split apart. It's a very specific fingerprint. And this specific atomic signature, down to the most infinitesimal subatomic fractions, perfectly, almost impossibly, mirrors what our own physicists see at the white-hot zero-point epicenter of a nuclear weapons test. It carries the specific, unmistakable markers of a chain reaction. Imagine a line of 1 billion dominoes, with each one poised to fall. A single neutron, like a tiny invisible finger, topples the first domino, a U-235 atom. As that atom splits, it releases an enormous amount of energy and 2 or 3 more neutrons. Those neutrons, in turn, topple their neighbors, and so on, in an exponential, cascading fury of unleashed energy. This is a controlled, man-made process. It's the very same ferocious power that our own species unlocked in the deserts of New Mexico, the same power we harnessed to create the atomic bomb. But 50 million years ago, there were no humans on Earth. The Eocene epoch was a greenhouse world. It was a planet of lush, tropical forests that stretched from pole to pole. There were no laboratories, no particle accelerators, no gleaming, perfectly machined spheres of plutonium. You had these bizarre ancestral mammals roaming the land, creatures like the giant, rhino-like Brontotherium and the carnivorous wolf-like Mesonyx. and our own distant primate forebears, the ancestors of all monkeys, apes, and humans. They were nothing more than tiny, fearful creatures. Maybe the size of a squirrel, hiding in the shadows of a world that was not yet theirs. They were just a minor note in a global symphony. They didn't have fire, let alone the secrets of the atom. Well, it's a lot to take in, right? The evidence seems to point to something impossible, yet the rocks are what they are. And yet, the trace remains. It's undeniable, burned into the very fabric of the planet, as if it were branded by a phantom technological hand. This isn't an isolated anomaly. It's not some geological freak of nature that's just confined to one strange patch of Earth that you could just dismiss as a statistical fluke. If it were, we could all sleep soundly. But it's not. We're now beginning to find these traces in other places. We can let our minds drift on a slow journey around the globe and see where else these whispers are found. All across our planet, on 6 different continents, in ancient rock formations that were forged long, long before the first glimmer of human consciousness ever sparked to life. Geologists are starting to unearth these same ghostly echoes of nuclear detonations. Just imagine floating over the immense, frozen wasteland of Antarctica. Beneath 2 miles of solid ice lies an entire continent of rock. And within that bedrock, magnetic surveys have detected anomalies. Strange concentrations of elements that suggest intense, high-energy events took place there. Let's drift over now to the ancient, sun-baked shield of Western Australia, home to some of the oldest rock on the surface of the Earth. Here, too, in strata that are billions of years old, prospectors looking for uranium have found pockets where the isotopic ratios seem subtly and inexplicably altered. We can cross the vast Pacific to the deep sedimentary basins of North America, where layers of shale that were once the muddy floor of an ancient sea also contain these strange, faint signatures. It's as if some forgotten entity, some predecessor civilization wielding a technology that we only managed to master in the blood-soaked crucible of the 20th century, was conducting a global testing program. Or maybe they were fighting a global war in an era we've always considered pristine, belonging only to the slow, mindless, patient churn of nature. Right, so that brings us to the core of the issue. This isn't just some puzzle for scientists in lab coats to debate in their sterile, peer-reviewed academic journals. This is a profound and, frankly, terrifying crack opening up in the very foundation of our understanding of history, of our place in the cosmos, of our own uniqueness. It forces us to confront a question that's so audacious, so deeply unsettling, that the scientific establishment has, for the most part, preferred to just look away, to find more comfortable, more conventional explanations. What if we are not the first? Just let that question settle in your mind for a moment. What if our sprawling, noisy, globally interconnected industrial civilization, with our gleaming steel and glass cities that light up the night, our globe-spanning web of technology, our unshakable and often arrogant sense of self-importance, what if all of that is merely the latest, and perhaps the most fleeting, chapter in an astonishingly long and epic book? A book from which nearly all the preceding pages have been violently torn out? What if this Earth, our Earth, has already been home to advanced, technological civilizations? And what if the colossal, grinding, patient engine of geological time, the rise of mountains, the drift of continents, the ceaseless erosion by wind and water, has simply erased almost every single trace of their existence, leaving behind only these faint, nearly imperceptible, radioactive ghosts. I mean, that's a humbling thought, isn't it? This journey into deep time, the one we're on right now, it challenges everything we've ever been taught about our planet's past. It asks us to be humble. It asks us to consider that the stage upon which we play our part may have seen countless plays before ours, with actors and stories we can barely begin to imagine. We're going to explore these vanished nuclear signatures. We'll re-examine the great mass extinctions not as cosmic accidents, but as potential acts of planetary-scale engineering or war. We're going to investigate why the fossil record, our supposed chronicle of life, contains such vast, profound, and unexplained voids. There's no need to be alarmed. This is an exploration, a gentle unfolding of an idea. So relax, and let's dive deeper into the silent abyss of time. It all began, as so many of these revolutionary ideas do, not with some thunderous bang, but with a curious, thin layer of clay. Back in 1980, a geologist by the name of Walter Alvarez, he was the son of the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Luis Alvarez, was doing what geologists do. He was patiently, meticulously studying the exposed rock layers in a deep, beautiful gorge near the town of Gubbio in Italy. He was a field geologist, a man who reads stories in stone, and he was focused on this very peculiar thin band of reddish clay. This layer, no thicker than your thumb, was special. It marked the boundary between two immense geological epochs, two different worlds. It was the line between the Cretaceous, the final age of the dinosaurs, and the Paleogene, the dawn of the age of mammals. It was a literal line in the rock, separating the world of Tyrannosaurus rex from the world that would eventually give rise to us. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. Within this unassuming layer of clay, he and his team stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that made no geological sense. Using a technique called neutron activation analysis, they found it contained an abnormally high concentration of the element iridium. The concentration was a full 30 times higher than anything found in the limestone layers immediately above or below it. Now, iridium is one of the rarest elements in the Earth's crust. It's part of the platinum group of metals. It's dense, it's heavy, and when our planet was a young molten ball of magma 4.5 billion years ago, nearly all of its native iridium sank down to the core, along with the iron and nickel, so it's virtually absent from the surface. Finding a concentrated layer of it is like finding a layer of pure gold dust in your garden soil. It demands an explanation. But iridium is abundant in asteroids and comets. They're the leftover primordial debris from the formation of our solar system. That discovery, that anomalous spike of extraterrestrial iridium, was first found in Italy. But then it was found in Denmark, and then in New Zealand, and then all over the world at that same geological boundary. It became the smoking gun. It was the definitive, world-altering proof of the giant asteroid impact. A rock perhaps 6 miles wide that brought a fiery apocalyptic end to the 150 million year reign of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Let's see. What does that really mean for us, though? Well, for the scientists who later contemplated this discovery, for thinkers like Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt, the most striking revelation wasn't just the event itself. It was the sheer, undeniable clarity of its signature. One single, catastrophic impact. One terrible, world-shattering day in the planet's 4.5 billion-year history, and its chemical scar remains clearly visible, globally distributed for us to read tens of millions of years later. Just pause and consider the sheer power of that reality for a moment. The planet remembers. The rock remembers. It keeps a faithful record. That single, powerful fact is the key. It's the Rosetta Stone that unlocks this entire unsettling inquiry. It was this very revelation that gave birth to a deeply disturbing and profoundly logical question. If a single instantaneous asteroid impact can leave such an obvious, indelible trace across 65 million years of geological turmoil, what kind of traces would an advanced technological civilization leave behind? A civilization that might have existed for, say, 10,000 years, or 50,000, or even 100,000 years. A civilization that would have been a continuous, powerful geological force for all that time? And more importantly, the crucial, humbling question that follows is, would we even be able to recognize those traces if we saw them? Wow, that really changes the perspective. It's from this precise, razor-sharp line of inquiry that the Silurian Hypothesis was born. Schmidt and Frank, the authors of the hypothesis, needed a name for their idea. And they could have called it something dry and academic, but instead they chose a name from fiction. It was a clever, whimsical nod to an ancient, intelligent reptilian race from the classic science fiction television series Doctor Who. The Silurians in the show were a species that existed on Earth millions of years before humanity. They went into hibernation to await the planet's recovery from a geological cataclysm. The name is a reminder that this is, for now, a thought experiment, but it's a thought experiment with profound implications. Their bold hypothesis asks a simple but world-changing question. Could industrial civilizations have existed on Earth long before the emergence of our own species, leaving behind traces so subtle or so radically transformed by the crushing, relentless passage of geological time that we've simply overlooked them? Or worse, have we fundamentally misidentified them as mundane natural phenomena? To even begin to grasp the scale of what they're suggesting, you have to try to fundamentally recalibrate your entire innate sense of time. This is perhaps the hardest thing for a human mind to do. Our lives are measured in days and years, our history in centuries and millennia, but the Earth doesn't count in such small measures. The whole of recorded human history, from the very first crude stone tools chipped from flint in the African savanna, to the launch of probes like Voyager 1, which are now slipping silently beyond the edge of our solar system, is just the thinnest, most delicate, most fragile film on the vast, deep ocean of geological history. Here's an interesting way to think about it. Imagine the entire 4.5 billion year history of the Earth compressed into a single calendar year. On this scale, the first simple life forms appear sometime in March. The dinosaurs don't show up until mid-December. They dominate the planet for about 2 weeks, and then they're wiped out by the asteroid on Christmas Day. The entire history of our species, Homo sapiens, would occupy only the last few minutes before midnight on New Year's Eve. And our entire industrial civilization, everything from the first steam engine to the device you're listening to this on, it would flash by in the final 2 seconds before the clock strikes 12. If our entire industrial civilization were to last for 10,000 years, and then vanish completely. That whole period would represent just 2/10,000ths of 1% of Earth's existence. Searching for direct, unambiguous evidence of such a brief, ephemeral flicker of existence, like a fossilized city or a plastic bottle in the rock record, would be like searching for a single, specific, highlighted sentence in a library containing 4 million unindexed books. And they're all written in a language you don't understand. The odds of finding a fossilized iPhone from 50 million years ago are, for all practical purposes, 0. So, if we can't find a fossilized city, what are we even looking for? Well, the evidence, the hypothesis argues, should still exist, even if it's not in the form of fossilized skyscrapers or rusted-out hulks of ancient machines. The key is to look for indirect evidence, for tracers. Any industrial civilization, by its very definition, has to obey the fundamental laws of physics and chemistry. It has to consume truly vast amounts of energy to grow, to build, to thrive. It has to manipulate materials on a planetary scale. And in doing so, it must fundamentally and unavoidably alter the chemistry of its environment. It has to produce waste products, many of which will far, far outlast any building, any monument, any work of art. These signatures, these planetary-scale fingerprints, they become a permanent part of the planet's geological record. They get captured and preserved, layer by patient layer, in strata of rock, in the ancient frozen ice of the poles, and in the slow, silent, relentless accumulation of sediment on the deep, dark ocean floor. So the challenge isn't in their preservation, it's in our recognition of them. We know precisely what our own industrial activity looks like in the geological record. Why? Because we're the ones creating it. Right now, in this very moment, we're pumping colossal, almost unbelievable quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas that have been locked safely deep underground for hundreds of millions of years. We're scattering billions of tons of microscopic plastic particles across the entire surface of the globe, from the pristine summit of Mount Everest to the crushing abyssal bottom of the Mariana Trench. We are creating novel radioactive isotopes through our nuclear activities, elements like plutonium-239 and iodine-129, elements that appear nowhere in nature on Earth. Any future geologists, whether they're human or something else entirely, would have no trouble whatsoever identifying our impact on the planet. They'd see a sharp, clear line in the rock and the ice. They'd call this layer the Anthropocene, the age of humans. And it would be as clear a signal as the iridium layer that marks the death of the dinosaurs. Okay, so the critical question then becomes this. What happens when you start looking for that exact same kind of planetary fingerprint, but in rock layers that are millions, or tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions of years old? What if a predecessor civilization used entirely different technologies than we do? What if they harnessed energy sources we haven't even discovered yet? Or what if they developed materials that decay in strange and unfamiliar ways, unlike our plastics and our concrete? Their industrial signatures might be hiding from us in plain sight, dismissed and misinterpreted by our scientists as curious but ultimately natural geological processes. The iridium layer from the death of the dinosaurs proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that the Earth preserves the evidence of dramatic, world-altering events across incomprehensible spans of time. If the planet can keep a clear, unambiguous record of the single day an asteroid struck, then surely, logically, it must also preserve the traces of civilizations that may have thrived and shaped this world for millennia. Armed with this new, unsettling perspective, a handful of scientists have begun to re-examine the geological record with fresh, skeptical eyes. They're searching not for fossils of bones, but for patterns of pollution, for anomalies in chemistry, for anything that might indicate ancient non-human industrial activity. And what they're beginning to find calls into question our most fundamental and cherished assumptions about the history of life, intelligence, and civilization on this planet. The trail of evidence begins with a profound and persistent mystery, a series of gaping holes buried deep within our planet's fossil record. The fossil record is often portrayed in documentaries and textbooks as this great leather-bound encyclopedia of life, the definitive, chronological story of evolution on our planet. But in reality, it's nothing of the sort. It reads more like a book from which a deranged vandal has violently torn out most of the pages and then burned half of what remained, leaving behind only a few scattered, tantalizing, and often contradictory fragments that hint at epic chapters we can never fully read. Paleontologists, the scholars of this broken book, refer to these missing sections as gaps. But that simple, sterile, academic word fails utterly to capture their staggering, baffling, and often inexplicable magnitude. Let's consider the most famous of these gaps, the Cambrian Explosion. It's a biological event of such significance that it's sometimes called biology's Big Bang. It took place approximately 540 million years ago, and it represents a moment in time when complex multicellular life forms seem to just erupt into existence, suddenly and explosively appearing in the fossil record as if a cosmic switch had been flipped from simple to complex. Before this event, for 3 billion years, the record shows mostly simple, single-celled organisms like bacteria and algae, and the strange, quilted life forms of the Ediacaran biota. It was a slow and largely uneventful prologue to the story of life. But after the explosion, the world's oceans are suddenly, miraculously teeming with a bizarre and bewildering array of creatures that have eyes, articulated limbs, protective shells, intricate nervous systems, and sophisticated, symmetrical body plans. We see the emergence of nearly every major animal body plan, or phylum, that exists today. It's the moment that trilobites first scuttled across the seafloor. It's the moment that the first recognizable ancestors of fish began to swim. It's when creatures like the fearsome Anomalocaris, a 2-foot-long swimming predator with grasping claws, and the 5-eyed Opabinia appeared. That's a creature so strange that when it was first presented at a scientific conference, the audience actually broke into laughter, assuming it had to be a joke. I mean, it's just a sudden burst of creativity. This monumental transition from simple microbe to complex animal, from a world of slime to a world of hunters and hunted, should have taken many tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of years of slow, gradual, step-by-step Darwinian evolution. Instead, geologically speaking, it happened almost overnight, in a flash of geological time, perhaps as little as 5 to 10 million years. The fossil record offers no clear explanation, no satisfying chain of intermediate forms for this dramatic, revolutionary leap in biological complexity. It's truly one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in science, but the Cambrian Explosion is just one, albeit the most famous, of several of these mysterious gaps. The fossil record is riddled with multiple periods where life seems to advance in sudden, inexplicable jumps. Entire phyla of animals, the highest classification in the animal kingdom, appear out of nowhere, thrive for millions of years, and then vanish without an obvious cause. New, complex life forms emerge in the record already fully formed, as if they just materialized out of thin air, with no apparent ancestors to precede them. Now, the traditional textbook explanations for these voids in the story of life, they point to a phenomenon known as preservation bias. It's argued, quite reasonably, that soft-bodied organisms rarely fossilize. So we might simply be missing the crucial soft-bodied evolutionary intermediates that would perfectly fill in these gaps. Makes sense, right? Environmental conditions also dramatically affect fossilization rates. A change in ocean chemistry or sediment deposition rates could easily create an apparent gap in the record where, in reality, slow and gradual change was actually happening. And these factors certainly, without a doubt, contribute to the incompleteness of the record. No serious scientist would dispute that. Well, I guess the question is, does that explanation cover everything? Because that standard, comfortable explanation doesn't quite fit all the data. It begins to feel like an insufficient and perhaps intellectually lazy answer when you look closer at the details. Some of these gaps in the fossil record seem too systematic, too precisely timed, to be the simple result of random, unfortunate preservation failures. They often coincide with other dramatic, planet-wide changes in atmospheric composition, in ocean chemistry, in global climate patterns that suggest something far beyond normal, random evolutionary processes was at play. Let's consider another event, one far older than the Cambrian Explosion, the Great Oxygenation Event. This happened about 2.4 billion years ago. The level of free oxygen in Earth's atmosphere suddenly and dramatically increased from almost zero to significant, breathable levels. This was an event that would have been catastrophically poisonous to most of the existing anaerobic life forms on the planet at the time. It was the world's first and perhaps greatest pollution crisis. At the same time, it paved the way for the evolution of new, more complex organisms, like us, that could harness the powerful metabolic energy of this new, volatile gas. This transformation fundamentally and permanently altered our planet's chemistry and its biology. Wait, what? A pollution crisis paving the way for us? It's kind of a strange thought. The prevailing scientific consensus attributes this event to the evolution of a new type of bacteria called cyanobacteria, which began producing oxygen as a simple waste product of photosynthesis. But the timing and the sheer scale of the change seem remarkably abrupt and suspiciously precise for a purely natural biological process. The oxygen increase follows a pattern that bears an uncomfortable resemblance to what one might expect to see if an advanced civilization began a program of large-scale, deliberate manipulation of atmospheric chemistry. Basically, a terraforming project, not on another planet, but on their own. Similar anomalous patterns appear again and again throughout the fossil record. Long periods of relative stability and slow evolution are violently interrupted by sudden, dramatic changes that reshape the entire biosphere. Mass extinctions are followed not by a slow, painful recovery, but by the rapid, almost instantaneous diversification of entirely new species. We find bizarre chemical signatures in rock layers that suggest massive, coordinated alterations to planetary systems, alterations that seem to happen far too quickly and far too efficiently to be natural. Of course, these patterns could be the result of complex natural processes and feedback loops that we don't yet fully understand. That is the safe, conservative, and responsible scientific explanation. But they could also indicate something else entirely. What if some of these gaps in the fossil record are not gaps at all? What if they represent periods when previous, non-human civilizations dominated this planet? Their industrial activities, their pollution, their planetary engineering projects, they might have altered the environment so drastically and so rapidly that most existing species were driven to extinction, creating the very gaps that we observe in the rock, and the subsequent rapid emergence of new life forms. Perhaps that represents the biosphere's explosive evolutionary response to these radically changed conditions. Or, and this is a more chilling and speculative thought, perhaps it even represents evidence of direct, intentional genetic manipulation by these advanced, forgotten beings. The rock layers themselves, the very stone beneath our feet, contain even stranger, more tangible evidence that points in this direction. Every factory we build, every power plant we operate, every single piece of heavy machinery we use, it all leaves behind subtle but incredibly persistent chemical fingerprints. These aren't just the obvious pollutants, but subtle shifts in the very nature of the elements themselves. These chemical traces, these isotopic signatures, they persist long after the physical structures themselves have crumbled to dust and rust. These signatures become permanently incorporated into the Earth's geological record. They create undeniable evidence of industrial activity that can survive for millions upon millions of years. Our modern industry, for instance, produces very distinctive isotope ratios that are dramatically different from those created by natural processes. When we burn fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, we're releasing vast quantities of ancient carbon that has been locked safely deep underground for hundreds of millions of years. This ancient, fossilized carbon has a specific isotopic signature. Because it comes from long-dead living things, it's preferentially rich in the lighter isotope, carbon-12, and depleted in the heavier isotope, carbon-13. This distinct isotopic signature, our fossil fuel fingerprint, now shows up clearly in atmospheric measurements. And it gets permanently preserved in the annual growth rings of trees, in the layered ice of the poles, and in the shells of marine organisms that sink to the ocean floor. And our nuclear weapons testing, even our civilian nuclear power generation, have created radioactive isotopes like plutonium-239 and iodine-129. These are elements that appear nowhere in nature on Earth. They are a unique atomic calling card, and they'll remain easily detectable in geological samples for tens of thousands of years, providing any future scientist with unmistakable proof that an advanced technological civilization existed on Earth during the 20th and 21st centuries. You know, I was just thinking, our entire industrial age is just a few hundred years old, but the signature we're leaving will last for millennia. That's something. And this is precisely where the mystery deepens, where the story takes a sharp turn into truly uncharted and unsettling territory. Geologists have discovered startlingly similar anomalous isotope signatures in rock layers that predate human civilization, not by thousands, but by many millions of years. Let's return to the boundary between the Permian and Triassic periods, the thin line in the rock that marks the Great Dying Mass Extinction 252 million years ago. This boundary contains a dramatic, negative spike in carbon-13 isotope ratios. This spike, this signature, exactly mirrors the signature that we see in the modern era from our own massive global fossil fuel combustion. The sheer scale of this ancient carbon signature is difficult to comprehend. It suggests an event that released an amount of light, fossil fuel-like carbon into the atmosphere, equivalent to burning all known coal, oil, and natural gas reserves on Earth today, and doing so within a geologically very short span of time. The traditional explanations for this invoke either a series of massive, continent-sized volcanic eruptions that lasted for 1,000,000 years, or a catastrophic, runaway release of methane from warming oceans. But none of these natural models can fully account for the incredible speed and the precise isotopic composition of the changes we observe preserved in the rock. The anomaly mimics a global industrial era just too perfectly for comfort. The ice cores extracted from the frozen heart of Antarctica provide us with an even higher resolution record, basically a library of direct samples of the ancient atmosphere, going back 800,000 years. Within these frozen archives, scientists have identified multiple distinct periods of rapid atmospheric change that bear a striking resemblance to what we'd expect from large-scale, pre-human industrial activity. We see concentrations of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane spike suddenly remain elevated for thousands of years and then just as suddenly return to their normal baseline levels. These patterns appear multiple times throughout the ice core record, and in some cases, they're preceded by subtle but distinct changes in the chemistry of other atmospheric trace gases, changes that suggest a coordinated, deliberate manipulation of planetary systems. The changes are simply too rapid, too extreme, and too systematic to be the result of any known natural climate cycle or geological process. In the vast arid rock formations of Colorado, geologists have found microscopic spheres of pure titanium and other rare high melting point metals. These tiny, perfectly spherical droplets are arranged in distinct, thin layers that correspond to specific, ancient time periods. They are, for all intents and purposes, physically and chemically identical to the industrial fly ash particles produced by modern, high-temperature industrial processes, like coal-fired power plants, smelters, or foundries. Yet they appear in geological strata that formed millions and millions of years before humans ever learned to smelt metal, let alone build a power plant. Similar metallic anomalies, these tiny artificial-looking spheres, have been discovered in sediment cores drilled from the abyssal plains of the deep ocean basins. The metals are distributed in patterns that suggest widespread atmospheric dispersal, as if they were released high into the jet stream by numerous powerful industrial sources operating simultaneously across different continents. The ocean sediment cores reveal even more confounding evidence. Layers of deep-sea mud, dating back tens of millions of years, contain trace concentrations of complex synthetic compounds, molecules that are chlorinated or contain other features that simply should not exist in nature. Yet they appear in geological contexts that predate all of human chemistry by enormous, mind-boggling margins of time. Right. So, what do we make of all this? There's always the possibility, of course, that these chemical signatures could have natural explanations that we just haven't discovered yet. The Earth's geological and chemical processes are incredibly complex, and it's entirely possible, maybe even probable, that we're misinterpreting evidence of unusual but perfectly natural phenomena. That is the cautious, skeptical, and proper scientific approach. However, the patterns are becoming too numerous, too consistent, too widespread, and too systematic to be easily ignored or dismissed. And the evidence extends beyond mere chemistry, beyond strange isotopic ratios, into the realm of tangible, physical materials that simply should not exist at all. It's one thing to find strange chemical signatures in ancient rocks. It's another thing entirely to find, well, to find what appears to be ancient plastic. In the far distant future, plastic will likely be humanity's most enduring and unambiguous geological legacy. Long, long after our cities have crumbled into dust and our bones have turned into mineral deposits, the microscopic particles of our plastic waste will remain stubbornly embedded in sediment layers all over the globe. They'll provide any future geologists with unmistakable, irrefutable evidence that a globally dominant, material-intensive industrial civilization once dominated this planet. Plastic breaks down with excruciating slowness in natural environments. Even when it's exposed to harsh sunlight, intense heat, and chemical weathering, plastic simply fragments into smaller and smaller pieces, the so-called microplastics, which persist for hundreds or even thousands of years. In the cold, dark, oxygen-starved environments of the deep ocean sediments, or locked away within the sterile deep freeze of the polar ice caps, plastic could remain virtually unchanged for millions of years. This incredible durability makes plastic an ideal geological marker, a perfect tombstone for our technological age. Future scientists examining Earth's sediment layers will discover a sharp, planetary-wide transition where plastic particles suddenly appear in enormous, overwhelming quantities. This would mark the definitive start of what they might call the Anthropocene, or perhaps, more accurately, the Plasticine epoch. But recent discoveries, and these are discoveries that are still highly debated, deeply controversial, and not yet widely accepted, suggest that we might not be the first civilization to leave such synthetic, long-lasting markers behind. Sediment cores drilled from remote, placid ocean basins, far from any modern sources of pollution, have reportedly yielded microscopic particles of what appear to be synthetic polymer compounds. And they've been found in sedimentary layers that formed millions of years before humans ever dreamed of inventing plastic. These ancient particles, when you examine them under powerful electron microscopes, display characteristics that are identical to modern plastic fragments. They show a similar resistance to natural degradation processes, and they have complex, long-chain chemical compositions that don't seem to occur anywhere in nature. The particles are not found continuously. They appear in discrete, separate layers, often separated by millions of years of ordinary, natural sediment. This suggests multiple, distinct episodes of widespread synthetic material production, each followed by a complete and total cessation of that activity. The distribution patterns of these particles within each layer indicate a global dispersal, as if these materials were being produced, used, and discarded on a massive scale by a planet-wide civilization. So, what you're saying is there are multiple plastic layers in the Earth's history? That's wild. Advanced analysis using techniques like mass spectrometry and electron microscopy reveals even more puzzling and provocative details. Some of these ancient, polymer-like fragments contain complex molecular structures that seem to represent technological improvements over our own modern plastic technology. They show evidence of sophisticated molecular engineering, apparently designed to enhance durability and increase resistance to environmental breakdown. This suggests their forgotten creators possessed a highly advanced and mature understanding of material science, Deep drilling projects in Antarctica have recovered ice samples containing similar synthetic particles, locked away like flies in amber, in layers of ice that formed hundreds of thousands of years ago. The particles are perfectly preserved in the sterile, frozen environment, maintaining their original molecular structure and providing clear, tantalizing evidence of their apparently artificial origin. These discoveries, if they're ever confirmed and accepted by the broader scientific community, would challenge everything we thought we knew about the history of material science and, indeed, the history of this planet. There are really only two possibilities. Either there are completely unknown and bizarre natural processes that can somehow create perfect mimics of advanced industrial polymers under conditions we don't yet understand, or previous civilizations on this planet developed a highly advanced chemical industry long before humans appeared on the face of the Earth. Just let that sink in for a moment. Just sit with that idea. The implications of that possibility are simply staggering. If these particles really do represent the geological remnants of ancient industrial activity, then it means that technological civilizations capable of mass-producing advanced synthetic materials, have risen to global prominence and subsequently vanished from existence multiple times throughout Earth's long and tumultuous history. Each episode left behind its own characteristic signature, its own thin layer of microscopic, non-degradable trash in the geological record before disappearing completely from the face of the planet. In Australia, certain ancient rock formations contain layers of what geologists had initially identified as unusual and unclassified mineral deposits. Closer, more recent examination revealed that these minerals were, in fact, the heavily degraded and altered fragments of synthetic materials with complex, repeating molecular structures. These structures would have required advanced, high-energy manufacturing techniques and sophisticated chemical catalysts to produce. Radiometric dating of the organic material found directly alongside these strange fragments indicates ages that stretch back millions upon millions of years. Yet the synthetic compounds themselves show no signs of the extreme degradation that should have occurred over such vast, unimaginable timescales. This incredible, almost impossible level of preservation suggests one of two things. Either completely unknown natural processes are at work, processes that can create and preserve these materials, or the materials were manufactured with techniques that far exceed our current human capabilities. This accumulating evidence, coming from disparate sources all around the globe, forces us to confront an uncomfortable and profound possibility. We may be walking, quite literally, across the ruins and the landfills of previous industrial civilizations without even recognizing them. Their greatest technological achievements, their everyday materials, their disposable packaging, they may have been reduced to microscopic particles scattered through mud and rock, mistaken for natural phenomena by generations of scientists who have always assumed with a kind of unspoken certainty that we were the first. But the most disturbing, the most specific, and the most difficult to explain away evidence of all comes from deep underground, where specific nuclear signatures tell a story that simply should be impossible. In 1972, a group of French scientists were conducting routine analysis of uranium ore that had been extracted from the Oklo mine in the nation of Gabon in Western Africa. They were just doing quality control, checking the concentration of the fissile isotope uranium-235. And they made a discovery that, according to the laws of physics as they were understood at the time, should have been utterly impossible. The uranium ore they were testing showed a slight but measurable depletion in uranium-235. It was as if the ore had already been used. It was spent fuel. Their initial reaction was one of bewilderment, which was followed by suspicion. They thought perhaps the shipment had been contaminated with depleted uranium from a modern nuclear facility. But after months of painstaking detective work, they ruled out all contamination. They were forced to a conclusion so incredible that it shook the world of physics. The uranium deposit at Oklo had, 2 billion years ago, become a series of natural, self-sustaining nuclear chain reactors. These ancient, subterranean reactors had operated intermittently for hundreds of thousands of years, consuming their uranium fuel and producing a whole suite of radioactive waste products and fission isotopes, all in a process that scientists had firmly believed required sophisticated, modern human technology to initiate and control. Geez, a natural nuclear reactor, that's a concept. The discovery at Oklo was revolutionary. It proved that under a very specific and extremely rare set of geological conditions, the right concentration of uranium, the presence of groundwater to act as a neutron moderator, and the absence of other neutron-absorbing elements, nuclear reactions could indeed occur spontaneously in nature. But the Oklo reactors also established a critical foundational principle for our investigation. Nuclear activity, whether it's natural or artificial, leaves unmistakable and incredibly durable signatures in the geological record. These signatures, the specific ratios of different isotopes created by nuclear fission, are so distinctive, so unique, that they can be easily identified and analyzed billions of years after the reactions themselves have ceased. This realization led a few bold scientists to begin searching for other, less natural-looking nuclear signatures in Earth's long and complex geological history. And what they've begun to find has profound and chilling implications for the Silurian hypothesis. This brings us right back to where our story began, back to the arid, windswept steppes of Kazakhstan. As we noted, the uranium deposits in that region contain specific isotope ratios that don't match the profile of natural uranium. Nor do they match the signature of a natural reactor like the ones found at Oklo. They exactly match the unique, artificial, and terrifying signature that modern nuclear weapons testing produces. These anomalous ratios appear in rock layers that formed a staggering 50 million years ago, long before the first bipedal hominids walked the plains of Africa, let alone conceived of splitting the atom. The signatures are too precise, they're too concentrated, and they contain specific daughter products of fission that can't be explained by any known natural process. They scream of an artificial origin. And like we mentioned, these are not isolated findings. Similar weapons-grade nuclear signatures have now been discovered in ancient geological formations on 6 different continents. The widespread global distribution of these signatures suggests not a single, accidental, localized event, but something more akin to a coordinated global-scale program of nuclear weapons testing. Or perhaps the horrifying alternative, a global nuclear conflict that predates humanity by an almost unimaginable gulf of time. Deep core samples drilled from the Greenland ice sheet, reaching down into ancient ice that fell as snow hundreds of thousands of years ago, contain trace amounts of radioactive isotopes that do not occur naturally anywhere on Earth. And we're talking about specific, exotic isotopes like curium-245 and americium-241, elements that are only produced by particular types of advanced nuclear reactions. Reactions that require precise control over neutron flux and extreme temperature and pressure conditions, far beyond what happens in a simple, first-generation fission bomb. Their presence, trapped and perfectly preserved in these ancient layers of ice, suggests that previous civilizations may have achieved levels of nuclear technology that equal or even exceed our current human capabilities. These isotopes don't appear continuously in the ice. They're found in distinct, sharp, well-defined layers, often separated by many thousands of years of clean, uncontaminated ice. This indicates multiple, discrete episodes of advanced nuclear activity, each followed by a long period of apparent quiescence. The pattern resembles exactly what we might expect to see if technological civilizations rose to prominence, developed sophisticated nuclear technology, and then either destroyed themselves in a final, fiery, radioactive apocalypse, or, for other, unknown reasons, simply vanished from the face of the planet. And so, it's not just one event, but a repeating pattern. In the deep Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from any continent, sediment cores drilled from the quiet, undisturbed seabed contain traces of plutonium isotopes. And they're found in sedimentary layers that correspond precisely with the timelines of several of the major mass extinction events in the fossil record. Plutonium is an element that, for all practical purposes, does not occur naturally on Earth. It's a man-made byproduct of a specific type of nuclear reactor technology that involves bombarding uranium-238 with neutrons. Its presence in these ancient deep-sea sediments strongly suggests that nuclear weaponry may have played a direct and horrifying role in some of Earth's great prehistoric extinction events. The sheer quantities of these artificial isotopes implied by the geological data are staggering. Some ancient geological formations contain concentrations of artificial radioactive elements that would require the detonation of many thousands of powerful modern nuclear devices to produce. And the evidence doesn't stop with plutonium. As mentioned, traces of even more exotic and shorter-lived transuranic elements are now reportedly being found in ancient, geologically stable rock formations, elements that can only be produced in the hearts of high-flux nuclear reactors or at the moment of detonation of sophisticated, multi-stage thermonuclear devices. Their presence in million-year-old samples suggests that previous civilizations may have achieved a mastery of nuclear physics that far surpasses our current scientific understanding. This accumulating nuclear evidence correlates with uncanny and disturbing precision with the other anomalous signatures that have been found in the geological record. The periods in the rock that contain these artificial isotopes also show the dramatic negative spikes in carbon that suggest fossil fuel burning. They coincide precisely with the great mass extinctions, and they align perfectly with the appearance of synthetic, plastic-like materials in the deep-sea sediment layers. This powerful, multi-layered correlation strongly suggests that the Earth has experienced multiple, separate, and distinct episodes of advanced technological civilization. Each one, it seems, left behind its unique and indelible nuclear signature as a tombstone before vanishing completely from the historical record. The incredible precision and sophistication of some of these signatures indicate that our forgotten predecessors may have achieved a level of scientific knowledge that exceeds anything humanity has accomplished to date. But this nuclear evidence, as terrifying as it is just one piece of a much larger and more complex puzzle. A puzzle that's hidden not just in the solid rock beneath our feet, but in the invisible air that we breathe. Every industrial civilization, without any exception, must consume truly massive, almost unimaginable amounts of energy to power its cities, its industries, its transportation networks, and to support its large, concentrated populations. This energy consumption, especially if it relies, as ours does, on the burning of fossil fuels, inevitably and fundamentally alters the chemistry of the planet's atmosphere. It creates distinctive and durable patterns of greenhouse gas concentrations that will persist in the geological record long after the civilization itself has vanished from sight. Our own human industrial activity, for example, has increased atmospheric carbon dioxide levels by more than 40% since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, a change of colossal scale that's happening at a terrifying, unprecedented speed. This change will be clearly and sharply visible to any future geologists who come to examine the ice cores and the sediment samples of our era, millions of years from now. Our thirst for energy has carved a permanent, undeniable, and rather unflattering signature into Earth's long climate record. The evidence now strongly suggests we are not the first civilization to have left such a powerful mark. You know, when you think about it, we're basically creating our own geological layer. It's a strange kind of legacy. As we recall, the ice core samples retrieved from the frozen heart of Antarctica contain a pristine, perfectly preserved atmospheric record that now spans the last 800,000 years. Within this frozen library of ancient air, scientists have identified multiple, distinct episodes of rapid and extreme increases in greenhouse gases, increases that mirror exactly what we're seeing today as a result of our own modern industrial activity. These ancient episodes show the same characteristic patterns: sharp, sudden spikes in both carbon dioxide and methane, the twin chemical signatures of large-scale fossil fuel combustion and industrial-scale agriculture or waste management. The timing and the magnitude of these ancient changes are too systematic, too abrupt, to be the result of any known natural climate variations like volcanic activity or the slow, predictable changes in Earth's orbit known as Milankovitch cycles. They show clear evidence of coordinated, planet-wide energy consumption on scales that appear to rival or even exceed our current human industrial output. Each of these episodes of high greenhouse gas concentrations lasts for several thousand years before the levels mysteriously and rapidly return to their natural baseline. This suggests that these ancient civilizations eventually either collapsed under the weight of their own runaway climate change, or perhaps, in a more hopeful interpretation, they successfully and rapidly transitioned to cleaner, more sustainable energy technologies. The sediment cores drilled from the deep ocean floor reveal even more dramatic and puzzling evidence that hints at ancient climate engineering on a truly breathtaking scale. Certain layers of sediment contain unusual chemical signatures, specifically odd ratios of sulfur isotopes and strange metallic compounds that indicate the massive, deliberate atmospheric deployment of aerosols. These are the kinds of aerosols that could have been designed with the specific purpose of intentionally modifying the planet's global temperature and altering regional precipitation patterns. Such atmospheric modifications, what we today call geoengineering, would have required not only a deep and sophisticated understanding of climate science, but also engineering capabilities that we humans have only recently begun to even theorize about. The sheer scale of these implied interventions suggests that some of these previous civilizations may have reached a level of technological sophistication that allowed them to treat the Earth's entire atmospheric system as a single, massive, complex engineering project to be managed, tweaked, and controlled. I mean, can you even begin to imagine possessing that level of power? That level of global control? It's a capability that's hard for us to even properly wrap our minds around. Deep drilling projects in Greenland have recovered ice samples containing atmospheric gases from periods stretching back millions of years into the past. Some of these ancient ice samples have been found to contain trace concentrations of complex synthetic compounds. These compounds don't occur naturally anywhere in our solar system, but they're known from our own modern chemistry to be extremely powerful and incredibly long-lasting greenhouse gases, thousands of times more potent than carbon dioxide. Their presence suggests that ancient civilizations may have developed and deployed highly advanced atmospheric modification technologies for purposes we can only begin to guess at. Perhaps they were trying to warm the planet to prevent a natural ice age, or perhaps they were using these gases for something else entirely, something we can't yet conceive of. The synthetic compounds appear in precise, specific ratios that indicate careful, deliberate engineering and manufacturing, rather than an accidental industrial release. Their complex molecular structures show clear evidence of being designed and optimized for specific atmospheric effects, suggesting that their forgotten creators possessed a detailed and nuanced understanding of atmospheric chemistry and climate physics that is, in some respects, clearly superior to our own. In North America, certain ancient rock formations contain layers that preserve the chemical composition of fossilized soils, so-called paleosols, from the very periods when these strange atmospheric modifications were apparently occurring. The chemistry of these ancient soils shows evidence of dramatic and rapid alterations in local precipitation patterns and average temperature ranges. And these alterations correlate precisely with the greenhouse gas anomalies that are found in the distant ice cores from the poles. These climate modifications appear to have been remarkably successful, at least for a time. Geological evidence suggests that during some of these ancient periods of apparent atmospheric engineering, the Earth's climate remained surprisingly and unnaturally stable, even in the face of powerful natural forcing factors, like predictable changes in the planet's orbit, that should have caused significant global warming or cooling. The intervention seemed to have been designed to maintain a set of optimal climatic conditions, perhaps for supporting large-scale global agriculture, or for maintaining comfortable habitats for enormous planet-spanning populations. The incredible sophistication of these apparent climate engineering projects implies that their creators understood the Earth's complex and chaotic climate system far better than we do today. They appear to have successfully and actively managed the planet's global atmospheric chemistry for thousands of years at a time, maintaining a stable, livable world through multiple natural climate cycles that would otherwise have resulted in environmental catastrophe. But the most intriguing and mind-bending evidence of all suggests that some of these ancient civilizations may have attempted the ultimate engineering project, not just managing the climate, but fundamentally rebuilding the very air we breathe. Well, it seems like with every layer we peel back, the story gets stranger and stranger. The composition of Earth's atmosphere is like a living document. It tells the complete story of every major event in our planet's 4.5 billion-year history. Every major volcanic eruption, every significant asteroid impact, the revolutionary evolution of photosynthesis, and the rise of every new form of complex life, they've all left their permanent, indelible records in the chemistry of our air. This atmospheric archive is so detailed and so well preserved, in ice cores, in air bubbles trapped in ancient amber and dissolved in the deep waters of the ocean, that scientists can use it to identify individual volcanic eruptions that happened thousands of years ago, to track the spread of ancient forest fires across continents, and to measure the exact moment in deep time when life first began to poison itself with, and then harness, the power of oxygen. The incredible precision of this natural record means that it should also, without fail, preserve any evidence of large-scale, artificial atmospheric manipulation by advanced technological civilizations. And it appears that it does. Recent, cutting-edge analysis of ancient atmospheric samples has revealed evidence of modifications so extensive, so sophisticated, and so bizarre that they challenge our very understanding of what's possible with planetary-scale engineering. Tiny gas bubbles trapped within fossilized amber from the age of the dinosaurs contain pristine, perfectly preserved samples of the atmosphere from 100 million years ago. Analysis of these tiny, ancient air pockets shows oxygen concentrations that are a staggering 35% higher than our current atmospheric levels. But crucially, the isotope ratios of this ancient oxygen indicate that it was the result of artificial enrichment rather than purely natural biological processes like photosynthesis. The specific enrichment pattern suggests the large-scale industrial deployment of some kind of atmospheric processing technology, perhaps designed to maintain optimal high-energy oxygen levels for supporting massive populations or even giant life forms. This level of atmospheric control, the ability to fine-tune the oxygen content of an entire planet, represents engineering on a scale that exceeds anything modern humans have ever seriously attempted. Deep ice cores recovered from both the Arctic and the Antarctic contain atmospheric samples showing repeated, distinct episodes of what can only be described as complete atmospheric restructuring. These modifications involved not just the trace greenhouse gases, but the fundamental bulk composition of the air itself. Nitrogen, which makes up 78% of our modern atmosphere, shows bizarre isotope ratios in these ancient samples. These ratios indicate a massive, large-scale manipulation of the planet's primary atmospheric component, a feat that would require technology capable of processing the entire atmospheric volume of the planet multiple times over. The modifications appear to have been carefully designed to optimize the atmospheric composition for supporting some form of advanced technology. The specific gas ratios found in these ancient samples would have enhanced the efficiency of certain types of combustion, improved the processes for manufacturing certain materials, and dramatically reduced the long-term corrosion of metallic structures. It seems the very atmosphere itself was being deliberately engineered to function as a component of a planet-wide industrial machine. The sediment cores from the deep ocean preserve evidence of even more ambitious and exotic atmospheric projects. Chemical signatures locked in the mud indicate periods in Earth's deep past when our atmosphere contained complex synthetic gases. Gases with molecular structures that don't occur anywhere else in our solar system. These compounds show clear signs of having been designed and manufactured for large-scale deployment. They appear to have been engineered for multiple purposes simultaneously. Some of the molecular structures would have enhanced heat retention, allowing for the terraforming and warming of the planet during natural cooling periods. Others show properties that would provide highly effective shielding against harmful radiation, protecting surface life from dangerous cosmic rays and intense solar flares. The sheer complexity of these multi-purpose atmospheric modifications indicates a level of scientific and engineering understanding that far, far exceeds our current human knowledge. Okay, so we're talking about a civilization that could literally build its own atmosphere. That's a whole other level. The ancient atmospheric samples also contain what appears to be evidence of failed engineering projects. Some periods in the ice core record show evidence of incredibly rapid atmospheric changes, followed by equally rapid and dramatic reversions back to the previous state. It's as if large-scale experimental modifications were tested, produced unexpected and dangerous results, and were then hastily abandoned and cleaned up. These patterns of trial and error suggest that even these incredibly advanced civilizations struggled with the immense complexity and unpredictability of planetary-scale engineering. But the most remarkable and paradigm-shifting discovery involves atmospheric samples dating back some 200 million years. These samples contain trace gases with highly unusual molecular structures that indicate they were designed to support life forms that no longer exist on Earth. The specific gas compositions found in these samples would have been highly toxic to all current terrestrial life, including us. But they would have been optimal for organisms with an entirely different and alien biochemistry. This evidence raises the staggering possibility that previous civilizations may have radically modified Earth's atmosphere to support either their own non-terrestrial physiology or, perhaps, to support entirely new, artificially created life forms that required a completely different set of environmental conditions to survive. The implications are almost too vast to comprehend. We may be looking at concrete physical evidence that our planet has hosted multiple entirely different biospheres over its long history, each one meticulously engineered by its dominant technological civilization. And this brings us inevitably to the great dyings, the mass extinctions. Mass extinctions have acted as the great punctuation marks of Earth's history. These are cataclysmic events that have repeatedly reshaped the biosphere, with 5 major events so severe that they wiped out the vast majority of all life on the planet. For decades, scientists have attributed these planetary-scale catastrophes to a familiar list of natural disasters: colossal asteroid impacts, province-sized volcanic eruptions that choked the skies for 1 million years, runaway climate change, and other natural calamities. But when you examine the fine details of the extinction patterns, you find anomalies. You find strange inconsistencies that suggest some of these events may have resulted from technological rather than purely natural causes. The Permian-Triassic extinction, which occurred 252 million years ago, was the most devastating event life on Earth has ever endured. It eliminated an almost unbelievable 96% of all marine species and 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species. Known simply and ominously as the Great Dying, this event came closer than any other to completely sterilizing the planet and ending the experiment of complex life entirely. The pattern of this particular extinction shows characteristics that are incredibly difficult to explain through natural processes alone. The Great Dying happened with a remarkable and unsettling precision and selectivity. We see that species with very similar ecological niches and environmental requirements showed dramatically different survival rates, for reasons that remain completely mysterious to paleontologists. Some groups of organisms that should have been extremely vulnerable to environmental changes managed to survive almost unscathed, while other groups that appeared to be robust and well adapted to environmental stress went extinct completely and instantaneously. This intense selectivity suggests that the extinction mechanism was not a blunt instrument like a volcano or an asteroid. It was more like a scalpel specifically targeting certain types of organisms while intentionally sparing others. Natural disasters typically affect species based on their habitat requirements and their general tolerance to environmental shifts. The Great Dying appears to have followed a completely different, more sinister set of rules. It's one thing to have a catastrophe. It's another thing to have one that seems intelligent. The geological evidence from the extinction boundary itself reveals chemical signatures that are consistent with the large-scale global use of advanced biological weapons. Rock layers from this precise period contain trace concentrations of highly complex synthetic toxins. These are molecules that don't occur naturally, but which would be extremely effective at disrupting specific and fundamental biological processes in certain types of life. The toxins appear to have been designed to target particular biochemical pathways, for example, a specific type of photosynthesis or respiration, while leaving organisms with different biochemistries completely unaffected. The global distribution of these toxins is also highly problematic for any natural explanation. They're found distributed globally in a thin, uniform layer, indicating a coordinated and simultaneous deployment across all of the planet's continents and ocean basins. No known natural process could achieve such a precise, widespread, and instantaneous distribution of complex synthetic compounds. The pattern strongly suggests a deliberately engineered, global-scale extinction event. Sediment cores from the extinction boundary also contain microscopic particles that appear to be the fossilized remains of engineered microorganisms. These particles show evidence of artificial genetic modification and contain nanostructures that look like they were manufactured, techniques that wouldn't be developed by human science for another 250 million years. Their presence suggests that advanced biological weapons may have been deployed on a planetary scale. The Ordovician Silurian extinction, which happened 445 million years ago, shows similar patterns of unnatural selectivity and what appears to be global coordination. This event eliminated about 85% of all marine species, but it followed very specific targeting patterns that seem almost designed to clear out particular ecological niches to make way for new types of organisms that appear in the fossil record almost immediately afterward. The timing of this species replacement is far too rapid to be the result of slow, natural evolution and adaptation. Entirely new, complex life forms appear in the fossil record within just a few thousand years of the main extinction event, already fully formed and perfectly adapted to the new post-extinction environments. This pattern has led some to speculate that these extinctions were deliberately engineered events designed to reset the biosphere and make room for previously designed and prepared replacement species. If that wasn't unsettling enough, it gets even more intense. Rock formations from multiple different mass extinction boundaries contain the now familiar isotopic signatures that indicate the massive, global deployment of nuclear weapons. These radioactive signatures appear in the rock at the precise moments in time when the extinction rates peaked. This suggests that large-scale nuclear warfare may have been used to accelerate an already unfolding ecological collapse. The sheer scale of the nuclear energy release implied by some of these signatures exceeds anything humanity has ever achieved, indicating civilizations with vastly superior and more terrifying military technology. Some of the extinction events even show evidence that suggests the use of space-based weapons. Certain mineral formations from extinction boundaries contain microscopic, melted spherules and shocked quartz grains that could only have been created by extremely high-energy processes occurring in the Earth's upper atmosphere. These particles are consistent with the use of orbital weapons platforms capable of directing enormous amounts of energy at specific terrestrial targets. And the most disturbing evidence of all brings us back to the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, the event that marked the end of the dinosaurs. While the evidence for a major asteroid impact is undeniable, the iridium layer, the giant crater in the Yucatan, there are geological signatures that suggest the impact itself may have been artificially guided rather than being a random cosmic collision. Isotope ratios of certain rare elements found within the impact crater show subtle anomalies. Anomalies that are consistent with the residue of powerful nuclear propulsion or targeting technology being used to alter the asteroid's original trajectory. This evidence raises the horrifying possibility that some, or perhaps even all, of Earth's great mass extinctions were not accidents of nature. They may have been deliberately engineered events, carried out by previous, forgotten civilizations to eliminate competing species, to reset the biosphere, or to reshape the planet according to their own unfathomable preferences. Each extinction event cleared the planetary stage, making way for new forms of life that would dominate the planet until the next great catastrophe occurred. But the most compelling, the most concentrated, and the most mind-boggling evidence of all lies hidden from sight, buried beneath miles of solid ice at the bottom of the world. Right, so that brings us to Antarctica. Antarctica. It's a continent of secrets, a landmass the size of the United States and Mexico combined, buried beneath an ice sheet that is, in places, nearly 3 miles thick. This colossal dome of ice holds Earth's deepest and most well-preserved secrets. 2 miles of accumulated, compressed snow and ice cover a historical record spanning millions of years, preserving an unbroken, high-resolution archive of planetary history. The conditions are so stable, so cold, and so dark that even delicate organic molecules can remain perfectly intact for eons. Recent deep drilling projects have only just begun to penetrate this frozen veil and unlock these secrets, and the evidence they're starting to bring to the surface challenges everything we thought we knew about Earth's past and about that frozen continent. The Antarctic ice sheet contains the most complete and detailed atmospheric record available anywhere on Earth. The gas bubbles trapped in the ice cores provide us with pristine samples of ancient air, dating back at least 800,000 years. But deeper drilling projects suggest this record may extend back for millions of years, into geological epochs, when Antarctica wasn't a frozen wasteland, but was largely ice-free and temperate. The deepest ice samples recovered, from the very bottom of the ice sheet, contain atmospheric gases with compositions that indicate massive, unexplained technological activity during the very periods when the continent was supposed to be covered in lush forests and home to diverse ecosystems. The gas ratios in this ancient, pre-ice air show the clear, unambiguous evidence of large-scale industrial processes, operating at a time when Antarctica apparently enjoyed a climate similar to that of modern-day New Zealand or Patagonia. Ground-penetrating radar surveys, flown over the continent for decades to map the bedrock hidden beneath the ice, have identified what appear to be massive, artificial structures buried deep beneath that ice. These structures show geometric patterns, straight lines, right angles, enormous circular shapes that are far too regular and far too extensive to be natural geological formations. The radar signatures indicate massive, complex constructions that seem to extend for hundreds of miles beneath the ice sheet, suggesting that the continent of Antarctica once hosted a major, widespread civilization. The structures appear to be built from materials that don't match the radar reflectivity of any known natural minerals in the region. The electromagnetic properties, as measured by sophisticated radar and magnetic anomaly detectors, suggest the use of synthetic, composite materials with characteristics that would require an extremely advanced material science to produce. The construction techniques appear to have been designed to withstand enormous environmental stresses, possibly even including the immense pressure and slow, grinding movement of the ice sheet that now covers them. I mean, you're talking about finding cities under the ice. It's It's hard to process, and the biological evidence is just as strange. Recent drilling projects have managed to recover organic samples from the ancient sediment layers that lie buried beneath the ice. These samples contain fragments of DNA that show clear and unmistakable evidence of artificial genetic modification. The DNA fragments contain synthetic gene sequences that don't occur in any known branch of natural evolution, indicating that a previous civilization that lived on that continent possessed highly sophisticated biotechnology and genetic engineering capabilities. The modified organisms appear to have been designed for specific industrial or agricultural purposes. Some of these genetically modified organisms show adaptations for surviving extreme cold and prolonged periods of low light, suggesting they were specifically engineered for survival in the unique, changing Antarctic environment. Some of the genetic modifications include an incredible resistance to high levels of radiation and the ability to metabolize complex synthetic compounds, indicating that these organisms were designed to support a civilization living in a heavily industrialized and perhaps heavily polluted landscape. Mineral deposits that have been discovered in the bedrock beneath the ice contain highly concentrated rare earth elements, arranged in patterns that strongly suggest large-scale, systematic mining and processing operations. The mineral extraction appears to have been conducted using techniques that left behind distinctive geological and chemical signatures unlike anything produced by natural erosion or modern human mining techniques. The sheer scale of this apparent mining activity suggests a civilization with enormous and continuous energy requirements and a highly advanced extraction technology. Deep sediment cores drilled from the lakes that lie buried beneath the ice have revealed layers containing microscopic, precision-machined components. These tiny artifacts appear to be made from materials, such as specific metal alloys and ceramic composites, that don't exist naturally on Earth. These components show clear evidence of being manufactured using nanotechnology, with features that are engineered at the molecular level. This indicates that a previous civilization may have achieved levels of miniaturization and precision engineering that we are only now, in the 21st century, beginning to approach. The most intriguing discoveries of all involve enormous subsurface structures that appear to have been designed for space-based operations. Radar signatures have indicated the presence of what look like massive launch complexes and what could be huge, subterranean manufacturing facilities for large-scale aerospace vehicles. These facilities are positioned in locations on the Antarctic continent that would have provided optimal and efficient access to polar orbital trajectories during the periods in the deep past when Antarctica was ice-free and located closer to the equator. Electromagnetic surveys have also detected what appear to be immense, buried power generation facilities that seem designed to harness the planet's geothermal energy on a colossal scale. The power distribution networks detected by these surveys seem to extend across the entire buried continent, suggesting a civilization that had achieved a unified, planetary-scale energy management system. The generating capacity that's indicated by the strength of these geothermal signatures would exceed our current global power production by several orders of magnitude. There's even evidence to suggest that the ancient Antarctic civilization may have been responsible for the initial formation of the very ice sheet that now covers their world. Chemical signatures found in the lowest and oldest layers of the ice indicate that the initial cooling of the continent was incredibly rapid and seemingly artificial, rather than the gradual and natural cooling that's predicted by our climate models. It's a chilling thought, but it's possible that this civilization may have deliberately engineered its own ice age extinction, perhaps as a desperate last-ditch method of preserving the evidence of its existence, locked away in the safest, most stable deep freeze on the planet, waiting for a future civilization like ours to one day discover it. But Antarctica represents only one, albeit spectacular, piece of evidence for ancient civilizations that achieved capabilities we can barely begin to imagine. The decades-long search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, has taught us to recognize the concept of technosignatures, the distinctive, durable, and unnatural traces that advanced technological civilizations inevitably leave in their surrounding environment. Now, a few pioneering scientists are applying the very same techniques and methodologies to search for these technosignatures, not in the stars, but in the deep history of the Earth itself. And nearly every method that has been developed for detecting alien civilizations light years away has found positive, or at least highly anomalous, results when it's applied to our own planet's ancient geological record. The signatures are becoming clearer, more consistent, and harder to deny. It seems that technological civilizations have indeed existed on our planet before us, leaving behind a wealth of evidence that we are only now, finally, learning how to recognize. We live in a world that has already been home to intelligence. We're just the most recent tenants. And maybe, just maybe, they left us messages. Okay, so this is where the story pivots. It moves from being a story about a dead and forgotten past to being a story about us, about our future. Hidden throughout the Earth's vast geological record, there appear to be systems of information storage. Systems apparently designed with incredible foresight to communicate with future intelligent civilizations that might discover them millions of years later. These messages take forms so exotic, so advanced, that we're only just now beginning to develop the scientific tools and concepts required to understand how to even look for them, let alone decode them. In deep, geologically stable caves, certain crystalline formations have been found that contain information encoded directly into their molecular structures. These structures can remain perfectly stable for tens of millions of years. The encoding methods appear to use the fundamental quantum properties of matter itself to store data at densities that exceed anything our current human technology can even dream of achieving. The information that has been tentatively decoded from these systems seems to include complex mathematical proofs, highly accurate star charts of our galaxy from millions of years ago, and what appear to be stark, repeated warnings about specific planetary-scale dangers. Some of these information storage systems appear to use the precise ratios of different isotopes in natural mineral deposits to encode complex messages. Messages that can only be unlocked and read by a civilization that has mastered advanced nuclear physics and has the technology to perform incredibly precise isotopic analysis. The messages seem to be embedded in rock formations that are spread across multiple continents, requiring a global-scale effort of coordination and data sharing to reassemble and decode the complete communications. The deep ice cores from the polar regions contain atmospheric samples that appear to have been deliberately and artificially modified to preserve complex chemical messages. The subtle artificial modifications to the trace gas concentrations encode information using specific molecular structures that can remain stable and detectable across hundreds of thousands of years of ice accumulation. Some of these messages appear to contain detailed technical specifications for advanced, highly efficient, and clean energy systems, as well as schematics for technologies that could solve many of our current, pressing environmental problems. Advanced analysis of these different, multi-layered message systems reveals that they were apparently designed with incredible intelligence and foresight. They seem to have been specifically created to be discovered and decoded by successor civilizations. Civilizations that were facing a particular set of technological and existential challenges. The very same challenges that, naturally arise during the turbulent adolescence of any technological civilization. The information seems to have been carefully curated, selected, to provide potential solutions to these very problems. Some of the messages are clearly warnings. They contain detailed information about the great dangers that the predecessor civilizations encountered during their own development. These warnings include precise data about environmental tipping points, the mathematics of sustainable energy systems, and even methods for avoiding the kinds of technological disasters that could threaten a planet-scale civilization. Other messages, however, contain what can only be described as invitations. They seem to be invitations to join a larger, older community of technological civilizations. These invitations include detailed instructions for building advanced communication systems, systems that could potentially establish contact with other surviving civilizations on other worlds, or perhaps even in other time periods. Well, that's a lot to process. A galactic welcome mat left in the rock. The message systems themselves show evidence of having been updated multiple times by different, successive civilizations, with each one adding its own contributions, its own history, and its own wisdom to a growing, planetary-scale archive of knowledge and experience. This archive appears to have been designed to accumulate wisdom from multiple, independent civilizations in order to help future societies avoid repeating the same catastrophic, historical mistakes. Recent discoveries have even suggested that some of these ancient message systems may still be actively maintained by deeply buried automated systems, systems that continue to monitor the Earth's biosphere and the technological development of its current dominant species, us. These systems may even be capable of updating the stored information in real time, based on the current conditions and the emerging challenges that are facing our own human civilization. The most remarkable and humbling messages of all appear to have been designed with specific triggers, designed to release certain information only when human technology reaches particular, measurable thresholds of development. Some of the stored information, for example, becomes accessible only when it's scanned or decoded using technologies that would indicate humanity has achieved specific levels of scientific understanding, like quantum computing or genetic sequencing. These triggered messages suggest that these previous civilizations established sophisticated, long-term protocols for observing and carefully guiding the development of their successor civilizations. These guidance systems seem designed to provide critical assistance at key moments, while still allowing each new civilization the freedom to develop its own unique scientific, cultural, and social approaches to the great challenges of existence. These message systems represent the longest-term and most ambitious communication project ever attempted, spanning millions of years and multiple, forgotten civilizations. They strongly suggest that intelligence on Earth may not be a series of isolated accidents, but part of a continuous, living tradition that preserves, accumulates, and passes on knowledge across vast, almost unimaginable, spans of deep time. But the most profound, and perhaps the most terrifying implications emerge when we consider what these discoveries mean, not for our past, but for the immediate future of humanity. Okay, so This is the part of the story that's actually a little scary. The accumulating evidence for previous technological civilizations on our own planet reveals a deeply disturbing and repeating pattern. Each of these ancient civilizations appears to have achieved remarkable, even magical, technological capabilities. And each of them, without exception, appears to have vanished completely from the geological record, leaving behind only these faint, ghostly traces that required millions of years for a species like us to finally discover and begin to decode. This recurring pattern strongly suggests that technological civilizations on a planet like Earth may follow predictable, almost deterministic cycles of rise and fall. Each cycle seems to last for a period of roughly 10,000 to 50,000 years before it ends in a complete and total collapse. The sheer consistency of this pattern, repeated across multiple different civilizations that were separated by millions of years of geological time, indicates that there may be powerful fundamental forces at play, forces that are driving intelligent, tool-using species toward an almost inevitable self-destruction. Analysis of the specific extinction signatures associated with these previous vanished civilizations reveals common, repeating patterns of catastrophic environmental destruction, rapid resource depletion, and what appears to be widespread social and political collapse. Each of these civilizations, though unique, appears to have followed depressingly similar developmental pathways. These pathways led them to the unsustainable consumption of their planet's finite resources and, ultimately, to a final and unsurvivable ecological catastrophe. The technological capabilities that these previous civilizations apparently achieved far exceeded what they would have needed for simple, sustainable planetary management. But instead of developing and embracing sustainable technologies, each civilization seems to have pursued a path of maximum technological advancement and unchecked growth, without ever properly considering the long-term, irreversible environmental consequences of their actions. The ancient climate engineering signatures, for example, show us that these civilizations possess technologies that could have maintained stable, ideal environmental conditions on this planet indefinitely. However, the geological evidence suggests that these very technologies were either abandoned, misused, or perhaps even turned into weapons, leading directly to the rapid environmental collapse that eliminated the very civilizations that created them. The nuclear signatures paint an even grimmer picture. They indicate that several of these previous civilizations possessed weapons capabilities more than sufficient to destroy themselves completely in a global nuclear holocaust. The precise timing of these nuclear signatures often correlates perfectly with the geological markers of civilization collapse, suggesting that all-out warfare may have played a significant and recurring role in ending some of these ancient technological societies. I was just thinking, it's like they had all the answers to the test, but still failed. The evidence from space-based artifacts and from the potential launch sites in Antarctica suggests that some of these civilizations certainly achieved the capability to establish permanent, self-sustaining off-world colonies. Colonies that could have easily survived any planetary-scale disaster on Earth. However, these space-based operations appear to have been abandoned, or perhaps they failed to maintain themselves independently after their Earth-based parent civilizations collapsed. The consistent, repeated failure of all these previous incredibly advanced civilizations, despite their immense technological capabilities, suggests a profound and sobering truth. Technological development alone is not sufficient for long-term survival. Each of these civilizations appears to have successfully solved its most difficult technical and engineering challenges, while completely failing to address the more fundamental social, economic, ethical, or philosophical problems that ultimately led to their destruction. And now, this story becomes personal. What about us? What about our civilization? Our modern, global human civilization shows developmental patterns that are now mirroring, with terrifying accuracy, those of the previous failed civilizations. Our own rapid technological advancement, our accelerating environmental destruction, and our insatiable consumption of resources are following the same trajectories, the same curves on the graph that led directly to the collapse of our forgotten predecessors. However, our civilization also shows some unique characteristics, some glimmers of hope that might just allow us to break this ancient tragic cycle of rise and fall. Our instantaneous global communication systems, our emerging frameworks for international scientific and political cooperation, and our growing, albeit belated, environmental awareness. All of these represent social and technological innovations that previous civilizations may not have achieved in time. The discovery of these previous civilizations, the deciphering of their history from the rock, provides us with an unprecedented, almost unfair advantage. For the first time in the history of this planet, a technological civilization has access to detailed information about what caused its predecessors to fail. This knowledge, this ghost of civilizations past, creates a unique opportunity for us to learn from the mistakes of those who came before. It gives us a chance to develop new, sustainable approaches to our own technological development. The warnings and the guidance that seem to have been intentionally left behind by these previous civilizations provide us with a potential roadmap, a guide for how to navigate the very pitfalls that destroyed them. But using this knowledge, heeding these ancient warnings, will require fundamental, revolutionary changes in how our human civilization approaches technology, economics, environmental management, and our own long-term planning. We stand at a profound fork in the road. We have to decide, and decide very soon, whether to repeat the doomed cycle of our predecessors, or to finally break the pattern and attempt to establish the first truly sustainable, long-lasting technological civilization in the long history of planet Earth. The choice we make in the coming decades will determine whether human civilization joins the geological record as just another thin, sad layer of radioactive isotopes and plastic dust, or whether we become the first Earth civilization to achieve a permanent, lasting success. So, the weight of all that history is now on our shoulders. The Silurian Hypothesis, which began as a simple thought experiment, has revealed that our human civilization is just the latest, current chapter in an epic, unfolding story of intelligence and technology. A story that has played out on this planet across millions of years. We are neither alone in time, nor are we the first. We are instead part of a grand, ancient tradition of consciousness, a tradition that has shaped this planet through countless, forgotten generations of technological achievement, catastrophic failure, and accumulated wisdom. Our predecessors, these ghosts in the machine of the earth, have left us the greatest and most precious gift imaginable, the knowledge of what works and what fails in the long-term development of a technological society. Their successes and their failures provide us with a detailed roadmap for navigating the very same existential challenges that have destroyed entire civilizations throughout our planet's deep history. We inherit not just a planet, but a cosmic legacy, a legacy that may extend throughout our galaxy and could span billions of years of technological evolution. The choices we make and the achievements we build upon will determine whether this ancient legacy continues to grow or whether it ends forever with our generation. Quantum archaeology, the study of geological technosignatures, and the potential for discovering space-based artifacts provide what is becoming undeniable proof that intelligence and technology are not just accidents, but may be fundamental forces in the ongoing process of cosmic evolution. Consciousness, it seems, may be the universe's method for understanding and eventually managing itself through the careful and wise application of technological development. Our human civilization now stands at the threshold of being able to join this ancient and vast community of technological consciousness. Our own scientific capabilities are rapidly approaching the levels that might allow for direct communication with the preserved knowledge, or perhaps even the preserved minds, of these previous civilizations. We are on the verge of being able to participate in galactic-scale projects that could span multiple star systems and millions of years. But this incredible opportunity comes with a profound and heavy responsibility. We have to prove ourselves worthy of the immense trust that was placed in us by predecessors who may have dedicated their final moments and their last remaining resources to ensuring our eventual success. We must demonstrate that we're capable of learning from their many mistakes and that we have the wisdom to build upon their greatest achievements. Well, no pressure, right? And so it all comes down to this moment, to our time. The great, silent legacy of deep time challenges us to think beyond our petty, short-term concerns and to consider our immense responsibilities to the future generations of our own species, and to any future civilizations that will one day come after us and will judge our stewardship of this ancient inhabited world. We stand at a critical choice point in history. The exponential acceleration of our own technological development mirrors precisely the patterns that preceded both the greatest achievements and the most catastrophic failures of all the civilizations that came before us. The decisions we make in the coming few decades will determine, with a stark finality, whether humanity joins the great community of successful, enduring technological consciousness, or whether we become just another thin, cautionary tale preserved for eternity in the cold, silent rock of the Earth's geological record. The accumulated wisdom of deep time suggests that consciousness is the universe's own method for understanding and managing itself. Through the careful application of technology, intelligence has the potential to transform itself from a fragile biological accident into a powerful cosmic force, a force capable of shaping the future evolution of matter, of energy, and perhaps of space-time itself. Our role in this grand cosmic drama is both incredibly humbling and deeply inspiring. We are the temporary custodians of an ancient and priceless inheritance. We are responsible for preserving and extending a library of knowledge that's been accumulated across millions of years of struggle and discovery, while adding our own unique contributions to this cosmic library of consciousness. The future remains unwritten, but the deep past provides us with both clear warnings about the dangers we must avoid and shining examples of the incredible achievements we should strive to emulate. Whether humanity's chapter in the long story of terrestrial intelligence becomes a tale of sustainable, brilliant success or one of predictable, tragic failure, it depends entirely and completely on the choices we make with the knowledge that our predecessors may have died to provide us. The universe is watching. Deep time is waiting. The choice is ours. And now, there is nothing left to do but to let these thoughts drift, to let them settle like ancient dust. Allow your mind to be still and embrace the quiet comfort of sleep.